Давай я поставлю. сюда. Я просто не знала. Возьми фото.
Раз. Наталья Кирна пришла. Да, помогай.
Коллеги, сейчас будет табличка.
Привет. Или по-другому.
Что у нас здесь продолжается?
Нет, не нравится, когда денег нет. Ну что, коллеги, попробуем начать?
So, dear colleagues, let's start. So now, as soon as as we are allowed to start, you see a group of people from Ministry of Finances discussing. As soon as they allow us to start, we know who is the main person here. Please, at least here, do not show that you are managing us everywhere. Dear colleagues, dear friends, well, actually, a financial forum, Moscow Financial Forum, has become a real event. And it's really great that Ministry of Finance arranged this forum where we can professionally, not at meeting, to discuss these true problems, real problems that we face. Unfortunately, we have much more of these problems than non-problematic situation. I was trying to select a word, and I decided to use this non-problem, as I didn't choose anything better. So when today we start discussing inter-budget relations, well, I believe that well, basically here we have people who are related to that, not because they're interested, but because this is life, because this is condition of survival, this is condition of work. And the possibility to discuss looking into each other's hand, first of all, looking into Golin's eyes, first of all, Just raise your eyes. Watch your people, Leonid Vladimirovich, and to discuss these problems. Well, this opportunity is a precious one. On the other hand, well, I have such a feeling. We gather together every year and we discuss inter-budget relations. And I'm always willing to ask a question. What has changed during this year? Are there any changes at all? And if we see people, and I can see that the situation is the same, we still have lack of money and so on. Well, actually, it's wrong because a lot of things have changed. Just try to pay attention. A person who is responsible for budget relation is not only deputy minister, but he is first deputy of Minister of Finance, and I congratulate you with that. I believe that is for today is one of the most important achievements of inter-budget relations. Thank you. Well, not at all. Well, don't say thank you to me, but say thank you to them, and not in words, but actually while you distribute transfers. And on the other hand, there should be kind of things remaining which should not change, actually. For example, there is beautiful Larisa Alexandrovna Yerushkina. Well, everyone understands that finally she will be the one who decides everything. She's the same beautiful, the same charming. She's here with us, and then there is kind of guarantee of sustainability. Well, she is a guarantee for the point that it will not be worse. Gornin is a hope for the future, and Yerushkina is a guarantee that it will not get worse. Well, basically, strictly speaking, I finish my preface here, and we can switch to, strictly speaking, to the theme which we have gathered together for. And now, well, I have a suggestion. We have just discussed tax changes, tax system, and strictly speaking, one of the most important questions which was raised here is how these fiscal innovations that were adopted, how they influence budgets of regions, budgets of municipal structures, what has changed actually, what do we expect from these changes? And at that we do understand that President, while speaking about changes in fiscal system, he said that we must create stable tax system for the nearest 6 years. So this is the level of tax load which should solve main task, tempos of economical growth. Tempos of economical growth, well, this is the key to solution of the problem of quality of life of people and competitiveness of the country. And both without regions cannot be solved. And we see national projects, and actually we should talk about this today. We are talking about mechanisms, how these tasks will be solved. And strictly speaking, well, a lot of questions arise, not only because somebody likes or dislikes that, but because most of regions, well, I don't like these words like everyone. I believe this is too absolute notion. Well, most of them do not know what to expect. They do not know, not only from the point of view, before it was a problem of money, now regions do not always know the tasks which they will have to solve. And there is a very important issue. Well, it's quite clear that budget of the country will be, well, up to 1st of October, it will be considered by the State Duma, but all the answers, as I hope, will receive no sooner than the second reading in the State Duma. So we'll get them at the end of November. And what regions should do, which will get the final information only at the end of November, when they have a task not only to create budget, not only to calculate figures, but also somehow to outline how they're going to develop, how to provide for these tempos of growth. And tempos of growth is not only kind of federal indicator. Tempo of growth actually depends on development of every region, and they are in different conditions. So regions will get this information actually only at the end of November. doesn't that mean that the very process, the budget process itself is turning into kind of formalized procedure where we only need to put figures? But national projects actually are much more than figures. Those are very considerable and much more complicated tasks than we had for the country, even in comparison with the orders of 2012. Well, actually, in its essence, these are creation of new functions for the country. And it's obvious that these tasks cannot be solved without regions. And actually, I'm really willing to talk about this today. Well, of course, thank you. I'm firmly convinced that we'll say a lot of thanks to Ministry of Finance, that they will get at least some information, because a lot of ministries and institutions do not provide any information at all, and regions do not get any information at all as well, and that finances for ministries and institutions is the development of economy, actually. So today I would like, first of all, for people to get this information and at the same time to listen to the problems of regions and try to answer these challenges somehow, to create conditions so that after budget process is over, we wouldn't talk about the fact that we didn't have information, we didn't know, and after 1 year we'll correct everything. Well, and it's not by chance that here we have Leonid Vladimirovich Gornin, who actually, I believe that he will answer for everything and on all questions. Well, Sergunina has a table. Before that, nobody knew that she was Sergunina, actually. Well, today we have regions present here, heads of regions. Here we have people who are working with finances in regions, and I believe that this is a very systematic work. And I believe that here we specifically asked for Ministry of Economical Development to be present here, and Alimovich, Deputy Minister of Economical Development, will be able to talk with him about how he views this regional cross-section of state programs. But this is the next thing to discuss. And now I would like to say, I will not introduce everyone, but it's very important that here we have a person who was strongest in his idea. As you know, that ideas of Mao are very strong. They were talking about Marx, I'm sorry. But Mao actually is the same ideas. Well, Vladimir Alexandrovich, who is actually training staff for regions, for municipalities, and they even have a department of department management. And I would like to say, I have a question to you, just going a little bit ahead. Well, please tell how you train your students, and is it possible to educate students of the Faculty of Municipal Management how to solve the tasks without money? Because this is the only question which should be answered, actually. And after that, we'll have all the rest. Hot water and all the communications. Well, how to solve these problems without money? Well, you study them, you provide diploma to them that they can do it, meaning that you know the answer, but not at first. First of all, Gorin should be responsible, and then you will be making a conclusion. You are wise, you are on top, you will be making a conclusion and speaking about how we are going to do that. Please do not interrupt me. I please do not say that I'm wise. Well, wise and modest. I'm more pleased to be called wise and modest altogether. And, well, as for the second time, you are saying this word modest. Well, I doubt it, as it said for the second time. When we were discussing taxes, I actually confirmed that you are modest. But as you are calling attention to that, I do have strong doubts. Well, considering that, I took too much of your time. Well, actually, I have done it on purpose because I'm not sure that Nikolai Vladimirovich has answers to all the questions. So I just wanted to reduce the time when you can have Q&A session. Well, before I ask the first questions, it will be to you, I'm sorry. You, please, bring the first slide to the screen. So this slide about the amounts of inter-budget transfers for 6 national projects, including social sphere as well. As you see, this is a general expense. We do not specify for regions and anything, but it's a very important thing. And from here, we have a question. How do you view synchronization of realization of national projects as, let us say, federal tasks, regional tasks, and at the same time, well, strictly speaking, what do we want from regions? What do we want from regions? Because without regions, we cannot solve these problems. But actually, I believe that those are watching this slide for the first time. You see, they're taking pictures. They ask, and while they see quite great sums of money, but see their faces, they do not believe that they will get them. And they are right not to believe that, because it's for everyone, but not for everybody, but not for everyone. So, first of all, general question. Which is the time frame of synchronization, and how do you view this synchronization of federal and regional budgets? At that, I keep silence and give floor to Gordon. Good afternoon, dear colleagues, dear Andrei Mikhailovich. Actually, first of all, I would like to welcome all the participants of the forum, especially those who believe that one of the main questions at this forum is regional policy, regional development, and inter-budget relations. So, first of all, a special gratitude to them and special welcome to them. Well, Andrei Mikhailovich actually was very right to mention that it's very important for our discussion to be of practical value, and we must develop the issues connected with the inter-budget regulatory mechanisms and issues connected with the realization of 204 Order of President, which identified national targets and identifies strategic tasks for development of Russian Federation till 2024. And it's very fair to mention that this law, this order, and all the regulatory acts which will which will actually develop this order, will touch upon the activity. Do you mean the order of president? You said our order of our president of Russian Federation, not Ministry of Finance of Russia, of course. Well, it touches upon the potential of budgets of Russian Federation and the bodies of local management. According to our estimate, up to 60% of the issues which we have specified in 12 national projects and more than 70 federal projects, they are on the shoulders of our subjects of Russian Federation. And actually the most important thing here is that the subjects of Russian Federation for development of this order must understand, must transparently understand for the next 6 years not only the tasks and targets and the events that are going to be implemented within the realization of national projects, but they should know, of course, the resources. It's out of the questions that the subject of Russian Federation with local bodies should realize the tasks through the system of planning, of management, control of the correlating projects at the level of subjects of the Russian Federation. And it's necessary to emphasize that differently to previous tasks, these tasks possess more challenges relatively to previous tasks, which were brought from federal level to regional authorities, and they have more resources, resources provision, which is concentrated at the level of federal budget. And it's very important to faster bring to understanding of our colleagues the amounts of resource provision. Now, well, I'm sorry to interrupt. You will continue. What you are saying is very important, but the only thing is there are figures. Well, may I simplify that and switch from the language of inter-budget relations to clear human language? Well, there are cameras. Somebody is recording that, and somebody is watching us on TV right now. Well, who is paying for that? So the one who pays this year, well, to speak this language is mostly for resources which were created at the level of federal authorities. 12 national projects will be supported by 95% from the point of view of resource provision. I'm sorry, being first deputy minister, you do not know how to get focused on good things. Well, let's get focused on positive things. Do I understand correctly that the finances which were indicated as 8 trillion rubles? Well, the first answer, yes, no. These means are found. Yes, the finance 8 trillion rubles we have already found, and they will be positioned for years in federal budget. Okay, it's clear. Please, just a second. 8 trillions. Well, everybody says, well, no money or whatever. Now I have a question. 8 trillion rubles. Where do you find them? And now I see horror from this figure by those who came from regions, because actually this horror is connected with the fact where we are going to find that. You said 95.5. Well, once again, what are we talking about? Where we can get this finance? Is this federal finance, or where do we get it from? Rigidly, well, clear cut. Well, this is from federal budget. This finance is indicated in the federal budget, and actually this year and up to 2024, we are going to offer more comfortable conditions, in particular of co-financing of all the national projects which are developed within the order at more comfortable conditions for the subjects of the Russian Federation. Well, did you specifically not repeat 95.5? Are you scared, or will you repeat this figure once again? Well, I'll be happily repeating this figure, because this proposal was created by Ministry of Finance of the Russian Federation in the government of the Russian Federation, 95.5. So, well, the conditions of realization of the orders will be 95% supported by federal authority. So, then, I'm sorry, just for us, a specific question, specific answer. Well, 8 trillion for 6 years. Correlations of federal and regional finance 95.5. The next. Well, you just made it for me, and I'm trying to get that.
Mr. Rushkin wrote a text for me. I'm trying to reiterate what I said out. Well, tell me, please, when will you provide redistribution of inter-budgetary transfers? Here we have governors, and by looking at their face, and I'm looking at my governor, and tomorrow he'll tell me that myself as a deputy does nothing. So all these people will have to report to their governors. So tell them, please, when will you provide the distribution of interbudgetary transfers between the regions according to the national project? It's very clear that for all subjects, the most important thing is their transparency in interbudgetary relations. Especially, it's important that this distribution should be communicated to the regions earlier, and they should understand that within the 6-year cycle, we need to reiterate this success, and prior to the financial year, in the financial law, we will redistribute all the subsidies. So the government of the Russian Federation aims, before the first reading and better between the first and second readings, distribute interbudgetary transfers in the form of the target subsidies and other interbudgetary subsidies that will support carrying out of national projects within this period. I hope that we will be able to repeat the success of previous financial periods, and the regions within the law about the national budget after October and between the second reading will get the budget allocations in the volumes that will be agreed with the federal ministries and agencies. Wait a second. Natasha Maximova is sitting right there. She is Mom. of all the budgets, all the subjects of the Russian Federation. So I'm looking at her, and I can see her ready to answer the question, to ask the question, and I will address it to you, because if she asks you, you will feel far worse. So tell us, please, we have a certain amount of transfers that is distributed, and then it goes from one budget to the other, and so these funds you're talking about, will they be as a surplus to what we have, or we can say that these funds will be used for national projects as well? So is it additional amount of funds, or we will have to report for the same funds twice? 8 trillion rubles is a surplus to the basic resource, basic funds you're going to get that you received traditionally within the financial periods of time. I will give you an example. Talking about the improving infrastructure. Well, according to the decree of the president, we have to double the funds for this project. So 8 trillion rubles are additional resources to the traditional amounts that you received for basic directions for 6 years. Yes, exactly. Very good. Colleagues, 1 second. I'm asking the specifying questions. Should I continue or should I not? Or it matters for you? This specification really matters, right? So I'm doing the right thing. Okay, very good. Then just have some rest. Everything is going on well. Well, now let us keep on now. Turn our eye to the governors. So the governor of the Perm region. So we'll start with those who gets the least complaints. Thank you, Andrei Andrei Mikhailovich. He will listen to what you will say, and he won't reiterate the same thing. Okay, good. Well, this year, the system of interbudgetary system sees challenges it has not seen before, even last year when we integrated new mechanisms, and the influence was not that far. Well, only the volume of the tax potential for regions is estimated between 300 and 350 million rubles. This estimate is different from the Ministry of Finance, shows us, but then we need to take into the account the rate that the Ministry of Finance uses. So if the rate is 2.2, then you will end up with 300 to 350 billion rubles of tax potential. Then talking about increase of value-added tax, of course we understand that end payers are the population and the budgets. As for regional budgets, the increase of prices due to VAT increase will account to 60 to 70 billion rubles. So this is 1% of budget expenses, plus the income of the budget that will decrease due to the decrease of the profit tax. I'm going to interrupt you. You are talking about very important things, though. Well, the only thing is that if we mix it all, wait a second, it will sound very confusing. Talking about consequences of tax decisions, this is something to talk about separately, and we are going to talk about it for sure. But I think it's very important for us to focus on national projects. And I have another question for you, so I would like you to answer it. And as for the something what you were talking about, this is something we are definitely going to discuss it. You always start with the second part, right? Well, you see, you always want to talk about something what is important for regions. No, something what you can be responsible for and what can help you attract more funds. Well, you are a classic indicator of a wrong saying that the person makes the environment better, not vice versa. So you can see how an official can change his views as he moves from one position to the other, especially to the region that is the donor and that does not have sufficient resources. So you will talk, you will have a chance to talk about what you started talking about. It's very important, but let us focus on the following. How do you see the place of your region in the national program? Or maybe you are fine with your existing approach. So talking about national goals and national projects, where do you see the problem? Because Leonid Vladimirovich reaffirmed that you will get the figures at the end of November, but think about the problems you will face when it comes to carrying out the projects and reaching goals. Because as for existing systems, budget systems, this is something that has to be discussed as well. And as for taxes, of course, it has to be discussed as well. You know, talking about national projects, it's a very clear subject to the Minister of Finance. But if you talk about regions, they do not have a clear view because there is input data coming from in industries, and when Leonid was talking about correlation 95-5, this is important data from Ministry of Finance. But other ministries give different data. Some give correlation 70-30, and it's a huge difference. Of course, it has been developed, and they are going to synchronize their approach, but maybe it does not make sense yet to discuss these things with the regions. I'm not going to discuss them. I just want you to voice the problems that you envision, something what will have to be solved. Because, after all, the Ministry of Finance will have to carry out this program, and I don't want us to digress in the course of our discussion. You see, give me a minute, because the thing is that national projects, if they're financed based on 95-5 correlation, will give us no problem. We have money for demographics, for supporting population, social programs, and so on. And if we get something from the budget of the federal budget, it will be an addition, but from financial point of view, it will not cause us any problems. But the necessity to carry out and be in line with all other responsibilities, this is a real problem. No, wait. Alexander, you're going to talk about it. I just want you to understand a different thing. Yes, you said that nobody will say no to getting additional funds, of course. But not only will you get this money, you will be tasked with reaching certain goals. And because this money is given for a reason, and not, I understand that you don't know what specific amount you will get, but you also do not quite understand specific targets you will have to reach. And of course, these targets are not going to be general, same for all regions. They will be specific for each region specifically. You know, federal agencies work quite actively, and there were discussions, preliminary discussions, and we understand that information is still collected at the government of the Russian Federation. And I believe the more detailed information will be communicated to us at the next stage. But we are more concerned about the general budget balance, or imbalance rather, and will hit hard not only in Moscow, but other regions that have economic potential. And these regions need funds for development, because you can see new areas for growth. And for us, it is very important, something what we focus on. And this is an issue we set forth to the Ministry of Finance, and we hope they will listen and hear. And actually, I should say that Ministry of Finance is far more generous this year, and we understand that they're trying to integrate the new budget model, and it used to take money from developed regions, trying to equalize the situation across the country. So now they promise for us to get subsidies, and the additional subsidies, and 180 billion of our expenses is something what is acknowledged by the Ministry of Finance finally. I believe that this is a huge step forward. However, Andrei, I kindly ask you, am I saying too much? Well, You see, you're talking about various concerns, but I have a list of questions I have to address to you. You were talking about more close accounting of tax potential. You know, I was watching all your speeches, and this is, I understand you have a lot to say, and we can discuss it. But we started with the relation in interbudgetary relations. But, you know, we have a very important task set forth by our government. Are we ready to start carrying it out? And if we have any problems at the regional level, this is something what we have to earmark. But you know, if we put it all together, it will be very confusing. We will not get a clear picture. So I understand that certain discussions are taking place, and you're just waiting for more detailed figures, right? Well, the largest problem is the lack of clarity from the federal agencies. And we're not talking about our impossibility to carry out something and reach the goals. But if the correlation will be 95-5, there'll be no problem. Okay, then getting back to you, Andrei Vladimirovich, who, as a result, will communicate these indicators? Is it going to be an agreement with the Minister of Finance, or we will be looking at those target indicators and we will be in line with them? Or talking about indicators, each ministry will have something of their own, and who is going to communicate the goals that they should reach by getting these additional funds? As for the system of management, it is already shaped, and we understand very well, and by the way, it's a very good question, that not all national projects and not all federal projects will have a regional, financial support in the form of traditional subsidies or interbudgetary transfers. Of course, some segments will be supported by providing income sources. And this is a way to carry out national federal projects in a particular region. Therefore, based on the proposal of the Ministry of Finance, we see that the management system will have a special agreement within the framework of the national project, and for each subject of the Russian Federation, there will be a list of events and measures to be taken. So the federal bodies are responsible for the national projects, and they will have to sign an agreement with the governments of the subjects of the Russian Federation, and they will have to stipulate ways to carry out projects and ways to reach goals, and of course target indicators. Well, Leonid Vladimirovich, I'm sorry, I don't understand. If I don't understand, they don't understand either. So what are we going to get? First, we will distribute funds across regions, and then every agency will sign agreements with the regions where we will set forth the goals that have to be reached by regions. So regions will have a right to sign or not to sign such agreements. I thought when it comes to presidential targets and goals, you cannot discuss it. You just have to reach them. And Maxim Gennadievich was talking about this. There's no clarity, no understanding when it comes to funds or indicators. And you say that that there'll be understanding about the funds to be received at the end of November. As for indicators, they will be communicated later on. No, of course, that will take place at the same time by agreeing upon certain indicators. We understand that all the target indicators will be determined at the same time, and we will also agree upon the tools to reach those goals. So as for agreements and drafting agreements that will take place at the same time, so to have them ready by the second reading of the budget at the State Duma. So all these activities will be synchronized, so we are not going to put apart indicators and funds. Absolutely. Each region of the Russian Federation will have a chance to get familiar with the resources and with the goals that they will have to reach, and will do it in a synchronized manner. Okay, thank you very much. Nikolai Viktorovich, what do you have to say? And thanks for turning off lights. I will be more bold talking about it. You know, as for sociological polls, they always start with the following. Yes, we ask you to give a truthful answer, not thinking about consequences. You can do the same. Well, you asked what do regions feel talking about national projects. Well, talking about my region, I think we are going to be the executors, simple executor. Why so? Because at the moment we do not have any idea about targets and the funds. And you were right by saying that you cannot take apart indicators and the funds. And yes, you need to ensure dialogue with the ministries. And and we do not get reference to dialogue very often as we try to communicate with the ministries, because very often they set forth a goal for us and they say you will get so and so much for reaching this goal. As for Ministry of Construction, they provided us not 5% but 15% within the national project. Wait a second, can this happen? Well, I apologize, but yeah, that's why I said that the dialogue must take place. When we talk to 95 to 5% brand dial, of course, this figure will be differentiated for each region. It can be 70 to 30. Same what happened for the order 1999, and 70 to 30 might be changed to 95 to 5. Of course, recipients will be able to get a co-financing from 95 to 5%, so the donors will have the opposite figures. The size can be 95 to 0. Okay. Do I understand right that if we sell something, let's say house, and then you can say that, yeah, negotiation is possible. Of course, the federal bodies can ask the subjects of the Russian Federation to increase their share of financing within the framework of carrying out the project. So you say it's 95 to 5, and Minister of Construction can say, yes, you have to work within the given breakdown. 95 to 5 was supported by the Prime Minister at a special meeting that took place at the government of the Russian Federation, and I believe that the federal agencies and ministries must be in line with recommendations given.
Всякое правительство он поправит.
Oh, he will correct. Thank you. He will support regions. So, well, basically everyone can reject. No, you cannot. This is the agreement which you cannot cancel. Well, before that it was a product, and when the parties had to participate, you cannot reject that. And from the level of co-financing, we should reach necessary level in our dialogue. I will ask to make a video of our panel, and you will be showing that to all the ministries and institutions that Goryan said like that, and he said complaining, and there is a decision of head of the government. Well, so it's clear. And the next thing, Leonid Vladimirovich mentioned that not all means will be directed as inter-budget transfers. That some of them will be substituted by new income sources or new norms for our own income sources. Well, here I would like to have some clarity, because everyone can have totally different levels of financing for these sources. It actually depends on the value added or profit on value on everything that we should understand within the dialogue, how the profit sources will make basis for national projects implementation. That is the second thing I would like to mention. And as it was mentioned that he will expand the set of questions, I will stop with it. Thank you. And well, the question is very good. And there are a couple of ways of controlling national processes. These are classical subsidies and provision of additional sources of income. The position of Ministry of Finance, and I can speak about that openly, and we already discussed it with Mr. Siluanov, we believe that we should trust regions more. What does that mean? We believe that we should be as brave as possible in our transfer from direct provision of subsidies to switching the profit sources to perform national projects. One of the examples can be provided like that. Well, the financing of a main national project, which is connected to lots of subjects of Russian Federation. These are safe automobile roads, which has one of the largest amounts of provision, 1,300 billion rubles, which was identified while preparing the order. And we believe, from the position of Ministry of Finance, that managing these national projects should be done by means of step-by-step transfer of excise duty to regions up to 2024. And the main part of this focus should be 100 transfer to excise duty to regions. We should trust regions more, and we believe that the transfer of sources of income will make it possible for the regions to responsibly and independently realize the tasks within federal projects on special national projects. A beautiful task, but we have said 2024. 6 years is a good period of time, but actually, is it possible to make it faster somehow? Well, I said step by step. So we must reach the figure of 100% of excise duty transfer, not for 2024, but starting with 2019, and then with the correlating scale evenly. So, agreed. Well, Natalia Alexeyevna, you are... Well, Moscow is a very suffering region. Well, because basically the problem of budget relations, well, not basically, but very often we solve it due with the expense of Moscow. And now, actually, it's a separate thing. But how do you view the theme of national projects? This is the next question, as according to the conditions. But how do you view that? Or you don't have these problems at all, and you believe that actually nothing will, won't get nothing, and you will perform the order of the president without relying on someone. Well, at first, a couple of theses, and then a question to Minfin, Ministry of Finance. 8 trillions. Well, Maxim said that we took this money and now we see where it's taken to. And from that, I understand that it's not full amount, but I understand that this is the money taken from the region, the first component. The second component, even if in hospital we have 95.5, we still don't have enough up to 8 trillion. We have 400 billion, which is not enough, if I'm not mistaken. So it means that regions must find 400 billion. How many donating regions we have? It's quite clear that 400 billion should not be on donating regions. So again, the donating took away additional financial load. And next story. Is it sufficient for these 8 trillions to solve all the tasks? Well, now participating in different working groups, which is done by different ministries and institutions, we doubt the sufficiency of this money, because now it's finalized. We don't have finalized indicators, but even preliminary calculations create some questions, in particular as to sport. whether to increase indicators connected with the availability of sport infrastructure. This is construction. What does construction mean? Construction means that we take order from Ministry of Sports and they say which norms they have for this or that region. So Ministry of Culture to double indicators for cultural objects visiting. Well, just try to imagine what is to double parks or theaters or museums. How can we double that and how much money we require for that? Or demographical situation. National project, which is of utmost importance as well and not very clear to us. What should we realize from the point of view of provision availability of environment for kids up to 3 years old? How much is that, in what amount, which are target indicators for other programs, healthcare and so on? Well, whether these 8 trillions will be enough for realizing this problem is still an open question for us, and we do hope that finally, as a result of this discussion, we'll come to clear-cut consensus within these financial aspect. And I have a brief question. There was a phrase that donating regions can have from 95 to 0%. Can we specify from the point of view of Moscow, how do you view this financing for national projects? 0? Well, actually, this phrase up to 0 was actually quite embarrassing. I will translate into clear-cut language, which is clear even to Ministry of Finance. Everything will be solved, the figures will be calculated. Will Moscow get something, or you will only take from Moscow? And we have to think, this will be the second question, what else will take from Moscow as well? So can they actually hope for anything? Brief question, brief answer. Of course they can. You can actually hope, but it's a question whether you'll get it or not. So, dear colleagues, once again, I would like to emphasize that 8 trillion rubles for 6 years, well, is concentrated not at the expense of resources provision of the subjects of Russian Federation. That is the main thing. We actually do not take away anything as was expressed, as it used to be. So, as it's positioned normally, 8 trillion is additional source of which are not connected with the changes of inter-budget relations and taking out of this or that incomes. And what about value-added tax? Is it inter-budget, the increase up to 20%? Is it a source or not? Well, this is the second question. This is additional load, of course, as to the expense part of the budget. And that is what we're talking about. Actually, we can calculate losses not by direct allocation, but what is actually our expense obligations, VAT and 20% additional expenses for everyone. So in this discussion, do you understand why we need Parliament? Parliament is needed for this dialogue to happen through someone. Thank you very much. By the way, we'll get back to VAT because VAT does influence over regional budgets, but that is what I promised to Maxim Gennadievich. We'll discuss it later on. But the question to Ministry of Financial Development. Well, there is a decision that national projects will be submerged into state programs, and actually through state programs we'll realize this mechanism of implementation. And all the present here, I do not want to make a poll, but everybody knows that state program is totally inefficient. Well, they do not work. They are not related to regions at all, and because different from federal task problems, there are no obligations or rights or whatever. And what we see that national projects, national targets are merged into inefficient mechanism. So Ministry of Financial Development is on its own wave, so to say, and you have very depressing task to make an unfunctional mechanism being functioning. I do not always understand how you are going to do that, but it's not a problem that I do not understand, but regions don't understand it as well. And the main thing here is that for today, state programs do not exist today, and we have mechanism according to which, first of all, we have passports of state programs into the State Duma together with the budget up to 1st of October. Then we consider budget, and only after that we have a norm of the legislation. Up to 1st of April we should introduce changes into the state program according to the budget accepted. Is it true? Yeah. I'm not deceiving. So Alexei Mikhailovich is saying, and he will not let me deceive any of you. So is it possible that now we identify means, finances, we bring targets to regions, and we are even going to sign agreement. But reconstruct the state program for the accepted budget. We are going up to the 1st of April of the next year. Don't you feel that there is kind of, like clever people said, cognitive dissonance? Can I answer? You have to. Well, dear Andrei Mikhailovich, dear colleagues, thank you very much for this question. And please let me not agree with the thesis that state program is totally inefficient, is not working, and it's a useless tool. It's not so. Within the frames of state programs, we create totally clear-cut, transparent mechanisms of identifying of targets of financing, results which are to be achieved by this or that directions of activity. And within the frames of state programs, all the efforts of regional and federal bodies, we consolidate them within single targets where we have specific indicators of achievement of these goals. And a fair question related to the point, why actually we start actualizing state programs after we have budget? Well, today it looks like you have mentioned, and together with the Ministry of Finance, we have work arranged in order to synchronize this process and to make it more, let us say, adequate to the needs and our common needs. Well, as to efficiency of state program, 86% last year of the state programs were recognized efficient, and that is why by you, by us, and actually we prepare the annual report which we provide for government, and government considers all the activities in detail, and this report is sent to State Duma and to the don't you remember the figures which were provided by the efficiency of the state program? And you are saying that it's sufficient. Maybe you will provide something. The figures, I know that as well. Of course, there are some trends which should be perfected. There are no limits to perfection. I do understand you very well. Then the questions that you pose are very fair. The budget is going ahead of the events and targets of the state program. State program is actually quite efficient tool because within the frames of state programs we have operation of regions, and since the end of the year we start special tool where we'll have, so to say, a personal account of region, where region can get to know all the ideas which are realized within the state programs. And this is the interface when we bring regions closer to each other within the events that we have at the federal levels, and as related to realization of national project and emerging into national projects into the mechanism of state programs. So the mechanism of state programs, as we believe, together with the Ministry of Financial Development and the Ministry of Finance, that this is an efficient mechanism and it requires some specific level of increasing of its internal efficiency, but it works, it does work, and we see the number of events which should be realized at the regional, at federal levels, and including non-budget means allocation. We have a lot of national projects which do not have financing as it is. This is a number of events which should be performed, as, for example, as release of this or that decision about decrease of this or that administrative load, improvement in different areas, and they actually do not have any financial component. Where can they be reflected? Of course, in state programs, and that is why this mechanism is absolutely necessary, and that is why we took a decision about consolidation of national projects at the basis of state programs. All the events of national projects are events of the state programs, but actually we are talking about the next stage, about the assessment of achievements of targets within the national projects and within the frames of creating specific mechanism for automatized systems which will track the efficiency of target achievement. That's very important. Thank you very much. I believe that all the present people understood what you are talking about, and so I translated it as words that will work even better. So, by the way, just in case, this is for Ministry of Economical Development, you just don't know. When you bring all the state program all together, just see the state programs that as a result of their 3-year performance, for some reason, decrease the indicators. You see, indicators by the end of 3-year period get down for some reason. And of course, we have a feeling that possibly we don't have to do that. We don't need to do that as these indicators get worse. Well, it could be good to see that, but on the other hand, unfortunately, when you are talking about advantages of state program, I would like to attract your attention that state program have different financing. Somewhere there is more money, somewhere there is less, and the indicators are still the same. And we find out that actually the performance of achievements of the indicators do not depend on money at all. And now we are discussing targets of national projects, the tasks that were put forward by the president, and these finance of 8 trillion. We can argue whether it's going to be enough or not, but this is huge money which will never be received by regions, and we would like them to go for true indexes, but not those which were invented before state programs, before the present time, and which do not bother anyone but for those who created these programs and then report for them. That is what I mention. Otherwise, I totally agree with you. Now you have a very hard work to be done to make an dysfunctional mechanism function, and that is why we put this finance to that. Ask them, do you know at least any obligation for state program, because they do not exist and they will have to follow them. And will they get to know that? And they will get to know that not before the 1st of April, and the agreement is signed with the ministry in November. So how can they sign this agreement when they will get to know targets from the state program only in April next year? So I would like to answer these questions, and not speaking about how satisfactory they are. You know, wise Mao, you could hear all this discussion. What's your feeling from the height of scientific thought? Vladimir Mikhailовich, thank you very much. Well, first of all, my scientific thought is like that. Managing by indicators is necessary but impossible. If it were possible, then the Soviet Union would have been developed very good still. The fundamental problem of the Soviet Union was to try to manage by indicators and perform the achievement of all the indicators, but actually the performer always knows better where to deceive, how we can break, what indicators to put forward in order to get the necessary good result. So this is a quite a considerable trap, and I always believed that for that reason state programs is actually a doomed tool. But I believe, first of all, it's beautiful, but as far as I remember, it's beautiful. It's from another anecdote, but it's also related to economical development. Well, national projects. National projects basically can be implemented through regions only. To quite considerable extent, it's a national problem because it is related to the sphere of Tatiana Alexeyevna Golikova. It's mostly of regional nature, and what we are discussing now, it's kind of first, but a very important thing. And the fact that until regions understand what's happening there and they're discussing what is 95.5, of course, that is kind of deleting the this is kind of delaying the programs, and I see kind of risks which I would like to indicate. Number one, we must concentrate on national projects, and we should ignore other directions of work, other functionings, and actually regions should perform a lot of functions. And from this respect, concentration on national projects at all their political importance, I believe, quite a dangerous thing. The second thing, well, I'm watching working with this in expert groups. Well, national projects are often related to investment program only. Development of culture, well, will restore Mariinsky Theater and Hermitage in every city. It's not clear who is going to work there and who is going to visit that, but it's quite dangerous.
And I would pay great attention to that. And finally, there's a risk of ignoring the difference between regions, and this risk is getting greater and greater, and this is something what we cannot but look at. And of course I have to give an answer to your question, so you won't excuse me of digressing. And Andrei Markovich, who is that? Andrei Mikhailovich. Thinking about the remark of Andrei Mikhailovich, well, actually, you asked me how to educate, and I was thinking about my colleagues. How would we educate municipal officials about working without having any funds or very scarce funds? You know, at the previous session dedicated to taxes, we always quoted our classical writers and authors who are dead already, and here we don't give such quotations. But you know, if you look at our classical book, it says, it gives you a very precise answer. So how would you educate people? By feasting and by praying. By praying. Okay, very good. You know, I don't know whether we should wrap up the discussion dedicated to national projects and how carry out them by praying. That sounds very dubious. So here I would not put a full stop, and maybe Vadim has more to say about that. But I would like to ask you to put slide 2 on screen. And Maxim Gennadievich already has given his standpoint, same for about Natalia. So, you know, why am I starting with a specific question? You, Maxim Gennadievich, talked about abolishing the tax for the property, and you said it would be equal to 83 billion. I don't know how you have come up with this figure, but since you already voiced that, I would like to turn to you. So how can you compensate 83 billion? And we have a question mark here. How can we compensate that? Dear Andrei Mikhailovich, I would like to emphasize that the Ministry of Finance felt always responsible about the subjects of the Russian Federation. And of course, at the moment, we are developing mechanisms for compensating the incomes they used to get, and something what is developed or would be caused by certain decisions taken at the federal level. We were thinking about 100% compensation, about introducing moratorium. We are not going to forget about our promises, and in 2019 we will take measures to compensate that. Talking about instruments, before you continue, can I specify one more thing? And actually, for the audience, do you agree that the Ministry of Finance takes quite a bit effort and does a lot? And you don't always have to say that Ministry of Finance does a lot. So let's not repeat that, but I can reword my question. We understand that abolishing the tax for this property of course stimulates the economy, but don't you feel that we stimulate the development of economy at the expense of regional or local budgets? Don't you feel that this decision, it's a right decision, absolutely, will be stimulated at somebody else's expense, not at our own expense? And your answer will be very important when we talk about compensation, because you know, sometimes it will happen at the expense of Moscow, at other regions, but we will help business anyway. Of course, all the decisions must provide certain stimulus. So altogether, we must solve our problems and find solutions. And I will tell you that the Ministry of Finance will, in 2019, will find tools and instruments to compensate for those eliminating limits, incomes, and we will make sure that we will take care of this, and we will continue stimulating them for the continued growth of the investment potential. How can we do it? Our models are going to be finalized in the very near future, and in the nearest weeks we will voice our proposals. Our proposal will be related to specifying the authority related to expenses, and we will get the expenses at the federal level related to most popular diseases, also that will be related to exercises to alcohol. And I'm talking about just certain instruments that will provide us compensation. And of course, we will take a responsibility to compensate the expenses by providing certain tools and providing you additional sources of income. And that will take place in 2090. And you will do it in full volume. That's my specifying question. And, you know, not only am I going to give the floor to you and you will voice your comments, but first, another question. We understand that something you were talking about sources and orphans and so on. All these benefits do not coincide geographically. We have different geography, and this is a foreword to the question you are going to voice. So, do I get it right that now you are carrying out work to compensate the incomes with the count of geography of the region in 2019, and I reiterate it again, 2019. So far, I'm not going to address questions related to 2020 and 21. After all, I'm a kind person, and there are certain limits beyond which his responsibility doesn't go. So in 2019, you will compensate the amount to the regions that will lose certain incomes, right? Right. We are going to offer a model, but forecasting the question, no, you don't have to do that. Yeah, I will. So we will offer a model that will foresee the compensation with the account of the original budget. But now I cannot help. But did you get an answer to your question? Oh, yes. Did you want to specify? Yes. So I need to understand how much you will take from us to compensate the missing incomes to others. In terms of taking income sources from you, and I want to emphasize that again, talking about income sources related to redistribution between the regions will not take place. So we're not going to centralize income sources for interbudgetary relations. So you will not be taking anything else. So since we started with Maxim Gennadievich, you were talking about very important subjects, and now let us go through this again. Can you voice your stand? Well, in terms of national projects, this does not alleviate any problems from you, especially when it comes to interbudgetary relations. So talking about the compensation of incomes, this is something what you have heard, so do not reiterate my words by asking what will happen next after 2019. And you got an answer for 2019. And you had another question, and I interrupted you. Well, you know, I feel that having this dialogue and talking about redistribution is this dialogue is misleading, and there are certain problems that we used to discuss 3, 4, or 5 years ago. Efficiency of budget expenditures, let's say, or now you're going to increase financing, you're going to support new projects, but we have not discussed the efficiency of functioning of the budget of the state companies. For instance, in our region, we have districts where at some cultural companies or organizations, there are 3.5 employees involved. So let's say there is a director, deputy director, and somebody else, a piano player or accordion player. And you see, we have a law, and that says that each settlement should have a club and something like this. So we understand that our network is inefficient, and we spend money on all these things instead of providing more efficient social services, let's say. today. So talking about municipalities and settlements, this is something what we need to discuss, especially when it comes to efficient use of funds, because that law did not provide a very efficient structure. So why don't you let regions decide for themselves where they will move forward? Either they will have a good self-governance, or we have a number of municipalities that spend all funds from taxes and subsidies just to support their local administrations. So why do we do that? Why don't we remove that inefficiencies? And one more thing I would like to say. We stopped looking at procedures. We have a very detailed budget code. We have a great federal law number 44, and now if you have any differences to changes to introduce, you need to change limits. So small deviations in prices in market situations initiates a procedure that is 3 or 4 months old, and that's what it takes just to announce a procurement. Well, the president tells us to win here, here, and here, and when it comes to budget law 44, it constrains us. So you need to understand either you can move forward efficiently or without any constraints, or you use your constraints. So let us look at procedures. We ignore them, and we look at the structure that we created as a New Testament or the Bible. It's not the Bible. It is a tool that should help us carry out the activities and reach goals. Another thing, what is done well as for Ministry of Finance with the assessment of efficiency of tax areas, this is a good initiative, and it helped us to revisit our tax benefits, and within 3 years we are going to increase the tax payments and that we receive, and we need to have better micro management efficiency, but unless we are having these deviations, we will not go far. So we need to create this motivation that will stabilize interbudgetary relations. Thank you, Maxim. And also, I would like Lenny to answer and to comment on that. We have one problem. Unfortunately, Natalia Alexeyevna has to leave us because she urgently needs to decide how Moscow will survive under the conditions that just have been voiced. So let us let you speak, and then her place will be taken by Alexei Lavrov. He is in this audience, and then he should be responsible for what he has created, because the budget code is his baby, after all. You know, I don't want to reiterate what Maxim has said. I fully agree with him. There are just 2 things I would like to add. First of all, when we start discussing interbudgetary relations, we always come up with interesting factors. That is the index of budget provision, and we always start developing our models based on incorrect or data, and we always discuss that with the Ministry of Finance. So we need to look at different factors as well, and this is something our colleagues agree with, and their colleagues are developing the new budget on the medical insurance. So this is something very important, and again, budget has to be specified. If we used to feel better, more comfortable about it because we didn't get your subsidies. Now, today, when this burden lies on us, and it is the basis of our interbudgetary relations, for us it is a cornerstone. So we believe that we need to get all together and discuss this issue once again. Secondly, while we are discussing ways of reaching the growth pace, and this is one of our objectives, we believe that agglomerations at this present point, including Moscow agglomeration, already demonstrate certain progress that is beneficial for the economy of the entire country. And now we must understand that we will need to find internal resources to fulfill goals that were given to us. We have no funds for development events. If we don't have that, we won't be able to reach the growth pace. And again, it could have a beneficial effect on the economy of the entire country. So I have a request to the Ministry of Finance, to the Ministry of Economic Development. Think about a comprehensive solution, because this linear decision can backfire to other aspects and factors. And you know, solving one issue may have a negative effect on everything else and can slow down our development. And a small short comment. The budget at the present moment is being developed, and it's very important for us to be heard. Only here, I think we have been discussing this issue for the third time. We used to have other meetings, and we know there is certain progress. And earlier you said that there is certain political context and everything else, but if we don't get together and if we are not able to hear each other, nothing good will come out of it, I can assure of that. Of course, we can discuss global projects that have to be implemented, but if you don't have a sound system, nothing good will be reached. And this is a main question, because taking resources from us and redistributing them for other objectives and not given other resources, that is the source of the problem. Well, before you leave us, Natalia, can I ask you to take a look at the third slide? Why? Because this is a slide we prepared together with you a year ago for the last year forum. So this is the assessment of an analysis of the regional obligations, and that is related to the consolidated expenses of the regional budgets. So we see that 96% is based on federal regulation. So we tell the regions do it, but we regulate it at a federal level. And by the way, it is a very valid comment. We are talking a lot about it. So if they spend their own money trying to reach the goals, why should we control it at a federal level? So I look at the figures, and I wanted you to demonstrate the last year's slide. Nothing has changed. I will not agree with you fully. Here we need to pay credit to Ministry of Finance. The Ministry of Finance has worked hard all year, and the thing is that in the majority of cases, these obligations related to the agencies, federal agencies' resolutions. And here, Ministry of Finance works too closely with other agencies and other ministries, but it's not a very quick process. But also we understand that if we do not solve this problem, we will get, and at the same time we get another set of goals within the national problem. So once we have to solve this, this, and this. And so apart from doing that, we will have to do something within the national program, and it will be heavily regulated. Remember, I gave you an example from the Ministry of Sports. So one says you need to fast and pray. Another says that, yes, you need to think as an additional meal or something. So, you know, it's strictly speaking, you are the headquarters that should do this work. The Ministry of Finance does something, you interact with regions. But after all, we were getting together with the Ministry of Economic Development. Why don't we think about canceling those things? It's not my personal opinion, but I believe that many of these obligations that are stipulated in the decrees of the federal agencies, they are not related to the necessity, but they just help certain officials prove that they needed by the ministries, but regions have to pay for that.
how can we intensify this work simultaneously with that being fair? Well, it's fair to say that now we get the task of utmost importance, but this is into the beautiful state programs that you have mentioned, and on those problems which are left for us from the non-brilliant state programs that we had before. Is it possible to intensify this work somehow? Can we put forward some real time frames, or is it scientific and research work and only for making graduation papers? Well, actually, this is important work and this is being done. And as to this part of questions, yes, well, there is some practical results, and of course, if we talk about the reduction of excessive regulation from federal level, it's important to mention here that being Ministry of Economical Development, we have already made some consideration of these problematic issues, which could be, well, regulated or removed. To remove some prohibitions from federal level. Well, we have checked them. This is around 110 of such potencies. What is the sum, if it's not a secret? I will tell it. It's a big one. It's more than 3 trillion rubles overall. And what is the time frame? I believe I don't want us to digress. Well, this is a systematic work which cannot be solved at the same time, and there should be a lot of changes introduced into different acts, into federal level and municipal level, and corresponding to all the orders. And today we are talking about the fact that we have prepared proposals for 114 directions, which will now be piloted to pilot regions, and according to the results of this work, we'll be able to scale this work for the whole territory. Well, strictly speaking, we're not talking about 10 years. It's still the same for now, but what is the result? But today we are close to final results as never before. Okay, as never before. Well, this is exhausting questions, and thank you very much. Well, Alexei Mikhailovich, please do not digress. The place is free. You were mentioned here. Reshetnikov, we're talking about you, about budget code. Sit here and let people watch you. Well, do not do it like this. Do not hide. Sergunin must save Moscow. And what should you save? Budget code. Nothing will happen to that. Everything is good as it is. We'll ask a question to you as well. And as Nikolai Viktorovich Lyubimov is here, what can you say? So, your senior comrades, senior on incomes. Well, Ryazan cannot boast with these incomes, but what are your problems? Andrei Mikhailovich, well, problems are mostly similar. For 72 regions are almost the same, 72 out of 85. Well, the main thing I would like to get back to this I would like to maniacally get back to the rules of 2 keys, because it's still not followed. And as you have noted quite correctly at the previous session, well, it's necessary for Ministry of Finance to take even more confident position, more persistent position. We understand that Ministry of Finance is doing a lot for that. A lot of ministries actually somehow dilute these efforts with their regulatory acts. And as I said in previous section, I would like to suggest that we must create a mechanism to assess regulatory actions, whether of regulatory acts within institutions. Because even if we start implementing national programs and state programs, we can again face the fact that there will be increase of requirements to the same sport halls, fire extinguishing situation. They are changing every year. We have increase of budget expenses due to the fact that somebody in ministry wrote that it's feasible to have like 100 tables for students, not 180 centimeters long, but 200. It's a brief example, but you see how many ministries we have and how many regulatory acts we have, which will not make it possible for us to balance the targets with the sources of income, be it into budget transfers or additional sources of income for budget. And of course, I would like to mention into budget relations to have some corrections for municipal levels to have additional income that I have already mentioned at the previous section, the same tourist fee, which will help it possible to attract tourists at municipal level. And the same people, self-employed people. Natalia Alexeyevna left, and now I can say about this. And of course, the regions around Moscow, well, they actually face outflow of population, and people get self-employed in Moscow and in Moscow region and in Ryazan as well. People from municipal structures come to Ryazan. I'm not only talking about Moscow. It is the same for all regions, almost the same situation. And self-employed after registration, and let it get to other regions as well. 50% will pay tax payments where they are registered. And this is... So municipal structure will be stimulated to strive for stimulating people for registration, and they will know who is working where, in which city, and what they are doing. It's also very important. So I believe that Leonid Vladimirovich already mentioned that it will see increase of income part of our budgets through reallocation of some excise fee sources. It's not very clear what this is step by step and why by 2024. We'll start realizing this project since 2019, and if our income part increase considerably only by 2024, we will perform the national projects by 2027, not by 2024. We should reconsider the approach here. And the last thing for our municipalities and for us, which play an important role, but it's kind of small detail, but quite important. Ministry of Finance was working with that, but then it was forgotten. What I mean is the necessity from our point of view to allow horizontal transfers between municipal institutions, because now it only takes time and efforts, and they should work through region, and there should be inter-budget transfers between the municipals, even though these relations can be regulated between them by themselves. And actually that's all. I see we are pressed for time. Thank you very much. We are really pressed for time, but let me just... We are talking about problems of regions. Well, I'll ask you to bring fourth slide to the screen. These are own incomes of budgets of subjects in 2018. The growth is around 11%, a little bit more than 11% for this year. And this growth, well, I can say how it is for taxes, but I will not waste your time on that. But there is a feeling, well, we have another important question. How are we going to stimulate those who work with the increase of potential? Maxim Reshetnikov mentioned that, well, we do need to stimulate those who work on increase of own tax potential for development. And Nikolai Viktorovich mentioned that as well. We often see that people get grants for development, those who decreased. And actually, I understand perfectly well why they decreased. Everybody decreased their income on paper, but this figure, 11%, it's not from nowhere. It's a real decreased income. And, if governors are willing, they will answer this question. And another question to Ministry of Economical Development. Please say, can we somehow improve the quality of forecast? Because 11% is a great deviation. I'm not talking about federal level forecast. It's even greater. But let's talk about regional, and we speak about it when we talk about budget. Well, as related to regional programs, we actually work at modernization of methodology and our federal forecast, and bringing it into correlation with the realities of time. And I believe that this process is absolutely obvious, because the conditions are changing, the environment is changing, and the forecast should react over these new challenges as well. So the methodology that we have now is actually going through some changes. Now we are in constant contact with the regions in this respect, and I know that in some regions there is quite considerable but you have confirmed the focus that we had. We understand, of course, regions, it's quite clear why they decrease, but why do you confirm that? or you don't have an opportunity to do it otherwise? Well, I can understand. Well, yes, today the system looks like that. Well, regions are making their forecast on their own, and they provide it for us. And talking about how regions achieve these or that indicators within the frames of their forecast depends on methodology. No. I'm not about methodology. Well, you see, we in this State Duma, we have the focus for social economical development, where we have incomes of consolidated budget. And we see that this figure is confirmed in forecast, and the forecast is provided by Ministry of Economical Development. So can we do something with the specification of this forecast? It's not a claim to you. I understand that you don't have any special department for that. I understand your problem. It's not a claim. Well, the key to this question is in methodology. If methodology is accepted by us, if this is brought into correlation with the current reality, then the forecast that will be done and which will be created in regions, then they will correlate to all basic criteria. This is a key factor. We cannot solve this problem otherwise. No way otherwise. Well, I would like to remind you that when you distribute grants by the regions according to their achievements, according to increase of tax potential, well, you consider data of this forecast. Exactly. We consider these forecasts, but I would like to repeat once again, this year we are making forecast, well, we are making methodology simpler. And we decreased 80 indicators of general list of indicators, which is used for focus calculation. That is done to simplify the system and make it more clear. Agreed. And while we don't have methodology, it will be on financial bodies of the region and who have quite clear and natural logic. I will just speak about the methodology, which is never described, but which is the head. First, we should decrease, then we should increase, and report for that and get a reward for that. It's quite clear-cut. It shouldn't be described. It works. Well, if in our vision we have clear-cut misconceptions of forecast, with objective forecast values, then of course we have an opportunity to work with the regions and to clarify this situation. But this is competence of regions. I understand regional competence. Let them be responsible for it, or nobody will be responsible for that, because now nobody is responsible for that. Thanks God. Alexey Mikhailovich, as I understand, governors do not want to talk about forecasts. What is feasible, actually? What is reasonable? Actually, there were a lot of important words said. Maxim Gennadievich said as well about 44 law, about budget code. And don't you have a feeling that budget code was written only for Ministry of Finance? Because actually, for each and every question that is solved in the budget code, we can find 5 mutually exceptional solutions which are accepted in the case of the necessary situation. And as related to the law 44, there's limitations for that. And I believe 223, where there is much more money, which we luckily get out of any control. 44 does not let them live peacefully, and actually it's around 30 trillion, which are outside of this control by budget code. Well, don't you have a feeling? I know that you're preparing new edition of budget code, and maybe it could be worth gathering together and discuss budget code, so that they would read it not only in Ministry of Finances but here as well. But how we can remove this when we establish these limitations for Federal Law 44 only for those who actually must solve these problems, the current problems, and this is a great burden actually, and it's what was absolutely fair mentioned by Permsky Krai governor. Well, I'm sorry, your Krai, yeah. Your region. Well, I'm forgetting about this regional nominations, and well, it's right with some to perform, but this is kind of limitations. Law 44, it's a burden. It's not a limit. It's a burden with which you have to run very fast. Can anything be done about that? I know that you were not prepared, and now it's interesting to hear you even more. Andrei Mikhailовich, dear colleagues, well, actually at previous session, which was dedicated to Law 44, we discussed that in detail, and in particular it was said, come to any region and say, let's get rid of Law 44, and everybody will be happy with that. And actually, the conversation should be about specific problems. Law 44 actually protects the customer from lots of claims from behalf of legal bodies, control bodies, and so on. Law number 44 creates clear-cut procedure. Well, let us say half of the issues really depend on minimal time frames for procedures undertaking, and half depends on the client. And it is describing the time frame up to 15 days. And the clients say, well, so many days. Well, it's a long time frame, but make it in 1 day, but the quality will decrease, and so on and so forth. But Maxim Gennadievich, I believe that the question was totally correct, that we should remove excessive control from clients and suppliers, but for that we have very specific offers to simplify plans and schedule of purchases, make one document, to make it scaling as the purchase time is nearing. So introduce additional participation principle when there can be another taxless procedure. So to switch discussion into specific amendments to this law. And in budget code, now we have a unique opportunity to write it so that it would be helpful. And the current edition of the budget code directly prohibits non-financed mandates. There are such regulations. Why it is not performed? Whatever we have there, and it's also there. So. Planning of budget, it's totally the components of subjects of federation, and of course the execution is also controlled, but if there is a necessity, let's specifically introduce amendments to change that. Please understand me correctly. Number 44, it's just one of examples which actually is discussed by everyone, but very recently I faced a very interesting situation. Well, I can even say where. I believe it was in Kostroma region. No, municipality has no money, and they have debts for payments, for gas, and tomorrow they will actually these problems will be for hospitals and schools and so on. So as a result, region fairly provides a loan to municipality, and they cannot even provide a loan because there are limits that they cannot provide this loan, and they invent a scheme how to get back this money to municipality so they can pay back for gas provision. They pay for that, and well, actually they pay for that, and after that, head of municipal structure will have a criminal responsibility for non-target expenses, and region say, of course we gave, but we will not protect him. Well, luckily he is not in prison, but there was a fine. But a person, even without any legal obligation, well, actually this is our budget legislation, and I believe Maxim Gennadievich mentioned that actually maybe will provide a capability for regions to control their relations with municipal structures without these crazy limits. We just provide them an opportunity to solve these problems. Well, actually, if budget legislation could be followed, this situation would be accepted. The contracts are for the limits of budget obligations, and if contract was made without any money, it means that at some stage there was a violation of budget legislation. There was no violation. There is not enough money only. The initial municipal budget was not balanced. It means that the subject of federation created wrong norms and didn't allocate financial assistance in the right way. And if there is no money initially, you can sign contracts or non-sign contracts. Anyway, the situation will not change because of that. So all these tools are present with the subjects of federation. Maxim Gennadievich knows how norms can be balanced or disbalanced. Any municipal structure knows that if when we say that we should control it more so that to provide budget provision for that, well, they say no, subjects will do that better on their own. And when there is imbalance of municipal budget, you already say that how so the budget legislation cannot allow that. Let's find golden middle, so to say. I don't understand one thing. Why, according to our budget legislation, we should put to criminal liability head of municipal structure who paid with the region, with everyone for gas. and he didn't take it to his own pocket, so to say, because he could have left. He could stop provision of hospitals and school, and nobody said a word to protect him. Luckily he was not in prison. Thank God, but it's our budget legislation. It's not budget legislation. It is budget legislation. Well, actually, gas is not related to this municipal structure. I don't know whose debts are those, but let's speak about this specifically later on, and you'll provide all the materials and.
And we will find out that it's not budget legislation, but some other sort of legislation that was infringed. It is about interbudgetary relations through which we do this, and you know it very well. And how about hospitals and schools? What are they? This is a budget enterprise, but they have obligations and they must. So it means that the parents have to pay for that. Oh, very good, great. Thank you very much. Well, you know, I'm under the impression that when the region is out of money and, you know, there are certain obligations, like with schools, then the region, municipalities tell to schools, you know, have parents pay for that, collect money from them, and that is how it works in our regions. And you can see that in all the regions and all municipalities. But think about the prudence of the system. And we are not talking about loosening some norms and regulations, but they have to be sensible and they have to take into account the problems that we have in our country. And they're all different. And do not think about convenience and comfort of Ministry of Finance. I really respect what you do, but now we give the word to the wise mouth. Well, colleagues, I don't think we have to do any conclusions here. I'm not going to conclude. I think everything is very obvious. Let me just make two comments. First of all, Alexei, we have problems related to the budget code. Andrei said that only the Ministry of Finance understands it. It is not correct. There are not the entire Ministry of Finance understands this. Just a few selected people, just a selected group, and you are there. So it's yes, mind-boggling, but we can understand it. And if we think that there should be direct action law, but when it comes to the budget law, this is not discussed, because if you understand fully, you will not be able to apply it. You know, it really overlaps with what Alexei was talking about earlier, and everybody was noting. It is, you said it's not related to budget legislation, but it is, because according to the civil code, you may conclude agreements, but then, according to this law, budget law, you cannot. So there is a conflict between the budget law and the civil budget code and the civil code, and then you may be guilty for following certain requirements. And you know, you have to bring them in line, and this is not something that has to be decided and solved by regions, but at a federal level, because you cannot have a situation when one minister tells you you have the budget code and do not follow it, while others will say we have civil code and you have to follow it as well. And you know what can happen. You know, it is a more fundamental problem. I will point it out, and actually it already was mentioned. And I will tell you, reiterate it as a scientific worker. So let's think about whether our state is federal or not. If you think about our tax system, it's not a federal tax system. If we think about the discussion that has just taken place, you know, when the representatives of regions at federal level say that we trust regions, you know, regions can say that we trust the federal center or we don't, but you know, if you think that you will give them money because you trust them, it is not about being a federal state. And I think that can cause certain confusion. And I'm not saying that federation is better than non-federation. Different countries may have different approach and still be successful. But we, you know, are trying to confuse ourselves by looking at certain historical fetish, and for me it's very important to Lenin voiced three standpoints in three different works. First, he said that federation is not possible in Russia. Then he said it is possible, and then he said that federation is necessary. So you need to understand where you are. Well, I understand, and anyway, I think that we need to decide altogether. But my goal is to thank Andrei Mikhailovich for being a great moderator. No. Most important thing, colleagues, show us the last slide, because at the very end of the discussion, we need to give a spoonful of honey. So I would like to thank our colleagues, and we know that there is one person here who is being waited by a big boss, but he's still sitting here and trying to explain how we will get our money. So think about growing our tax potential. The government is taking certain incentive mechanisms, and one of them to stimulate regions is the assessment of efficiency of the performance of the regions, and the regions that show best performance will be incentivized. And here we use number of indicators that take into account what the population thinks, and that comes to show social service, education, many other things. And the assessment will determine the grant that will be given the winner. So if earlier only 20 best performers will get the allocations, now 20 billion is allocated in the budget, and it is also decided to increase the list of top performers up to 40. And the allocation of sources will be done according to the methodology approved, and by doing this, we would like to incentivize the regions that also show good results. And this is in short what I wanted to share with you. Thank you very much. And I thank you, Azar, and it's good that Azar is not voicing certain figures, because if he did, then it would spur another discussion. And now we can ask Lenin Vladimirovich to summarize and tell us what he, as the first Deputy Minister of Finance, thinks about all this. Thank you very much, dear Andrei Mikhailovich. Before thanking you for being a great moderator of this session, I would like to lay doubts that were voiced by certain representatives, the representatives of our key regions, and they said that the money is taken from them. But I would like to reaffirm all of you that within the national program that will be implemented across the country, for the first time in 2019, we will increase significantly the interregional budget transfers. Once again, we increase them by 2 times. The national project of 2019 is estimated at the level of 790 billion rubles. As for 2020, this parameter will account for 1 trillion rubles. So far, we can say that half of funds that I have voiced are inter-budgetary transfers. These are the resources that indeed will end up in the regions of the Russian Federation, and the local authorities will get them additionally to the basic amounts that were received within the framework of inter-budgetary relations that traditionally were received. So this is a great additional resource that provides additional financial opportunities for developing their economy, their social sphere, and that will allow them to reach the goals that were voiced in the decree of the President of the Russian Federation. And you can see that I honestly kept silent, did not interrupt anybody. So a few words. My deputy, the mama of the budgets of the regions, so she knows. When she heard that, she said, "Wow, you can see how far we went in terms of democracy." Well, in the State Duma. Well, just a few words. We get together here every year, and I wouldn't like us I wouldn't like our meetings to look like a ritual, so people will be under the impression that we fight against our unemployment, self-unemployment. I think we have better things to do rather than discuss cement issues over and over again. You have heard all this, and of course a great deal of work is being done at the moment, and still so much is to be done. There are new goals, new projects, and there will be a new system of accountability. But I would like to pay attention to one more thing, and I would like to say it at the very end. And I'm doing that so nobody can reply back to me. You know, today, by looking at the agreements between the subjects, there is an accountability, and the subsidies will decrease by 5% in terms of if infringement takes place. Think about it. And a year later, I don't know what answers will be, what questions will be answered within a year, what not. And Vitaly said so much work has to be done in the legislative sector. But, you know, subsidies is something what our citizens are entitled by law, by constitution. So how can it happen if an official at any level breaches the rules and norms, and then they do not get the money that they should get by constitution? Somebody can object me by saying that this is normal, that the applications and the accountability will be efficient. But I'm absolutely confident that people cannot be liable for our mistakes. And hopefully, if we get back here in 1 year, we will hear a solution to this problem. So people should not be accountable for our mistakes made at any level. I would like to thank everybody who is here, who has joined us. I think it's very important that here we were very honest and very open. And I think we initiated a very important dialogue that the regions were missing, because most importantly, we must say that all objectives that the president has set forth cannot be solved without regional involvement. That means that good results will be reached if we are full-fledged partners. So we need to have a good, productive discussion. And I hope that this discussion has just started and it will be continued. Thanks a lot.